She grew up in the shadow of a wigwam burner in Central Oregon, listening to the roar of the bandsaws and smelling the scent of fresh cut wood. She wrote her first story at age 9. It involved aliens and ended badly, and never stopped writing. But she didn't really believe writing novels would be a reliable way to make a living, and became a journalist, thinking that would lead to a paying job. She graduated from the University of Oregon and won awards for writing and photography as a reporter at the Albany Democrat-Herald. She wound up her career in newspapers at the Oregonian and recently completed an adventure novel featuring a female warrior that has been in the works for more than a decade. And I read it, and it's fabulous. So please welcome Kathleen Glanville.
Woo! Thank you. My voice is very loud, so if it echoes, let me know. This, I don't know. How do I turn it down? Will that do it? Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
A little more natural.
Yeah.
Much better.
When we were planning, when we were talking about how we were going to present this tonight, we said my book and Cindy Brown's short story, wonderful literary short story, very different. And Holly said, well, let's see. Kathleen, your story is more the appetizer to the meal, the white wine followed by the red wine. In that case, mine is the house white, and Cindy is the Pinot Noir. But what I'm going to do now is to take you back to ancient Britain during the time of the Roman occupation. You realize that the Romans were in Britain for 400 years, twice as long as we've been a country. And the inspiration to this story comes from my daughter, who's over there videotaping, Maggie O'Neill. She wanted to go to women's college, and we did research. And I was so tired of everything I read at that era about around the world, people choosing to have boy babies and getting rid of girl babies, and cultures that disdained women. And I thought, no, we really need a mythology where daughters are celebrated, where daughters are applauded, and a boy is a big disappointment. So we're going back to ancient Britain. We're inspired by Boudica, the Celtic queen who led a rebellion against Rome in 60 AD and killed 100,000 Romans. Of course, they came back and killed 80,000 Celts, but it was a glorious time. and that's where history ends and my myth begins. I take this tribe after their defeat at the Romans, and they decide they could do without men. Of course, for the one obvious thing they need them for. So this is the first of 3 adventure novels, and we're starting. With John for Men, they live alone as women, and this is chapter 3 to give you a slice of that life. Caitlin paced restlessly at the edge of a clearing, putting herself between the sheep grazing in the sunny meadow and the great forest. She scanned the dark woods for danger, gently swinging a sling loaded with a smooth rock picked for size and weight. She carried a half-dozen such missiles, ready at hand in a pouch at her waist. She could hurl them all in less than a minute. A lamb broke from the flock and bolted toward the woods. Caitlin sprinted to head it off, catching it by the rear leg. She laughed when it tried to escape, picking up the wriggling creature and burying her face in its warm, curly coat. Silly Billy? She whispered her secret name for the lamb before releasing it. The lamb bounded back to its mother. The ewe bleated once and fell back to cropping grass. You aren't a very attentive mother, Agnes, she chided the old ewe. If you aren't careful, you'll lose, silly Billy. And how will you survive the autumn culling, huh? Mutton. That's what you're going to become, my dear. Mutton. When the barren ewes were slaughtered in the fall, Caitlin could not bear to watch. She would hide in the barns, hoping her tears would escape Kathleen's notice. The great barns were her refuge. She often went there to find solace and sing, enjoying the way her voice sounded rising and falling in the vast space. That's where her sister Katya had found her 4 years ago when she had miserably failed the warrior quest. Like every other 10-year-old, Caitlin had been expected to survive 2 years in the forest. Terrified of the dark and the monsters she imagined lived there, Caitlin came back the first night. Disgraced, Caitlin became a shepherd, the lowliest order of the Iceni. She was humiliated. Most of her sisters would rather die in the forest than return to live without honor. Caitlin had always known she was different. She was painfully shy and awkward. She never dreamed of riding to war and killing a man as other girls did. Caitlin was content to be a shepherd and ashamed to be content. Occasionally, a warrior came to Caitlin seeking a song to celebrate the passing of a beloved sword sister. Some hard warriors would cry as they told her stories of their sister's courage and sacrifice. They wanted their beloved ushered into the other world on the beauty of Caitlin's voice. Caitlin obediently followed her flock and ducked her head respectfully when passing a warrior. She quietly ate whatever was left when the warriors finished feasting. She washed stacks of pots late in the evening and listened to the warriors telling stories around the fire. And out in the open meadow, Caitlin could forget she was a coward. She pretended to be a mighty warrior, ready to slay monsters to protect her beloved sheep. She rarely lost a lamb to a wolf or a wild dog. She once knocked an eagle out of the sky. She smiled in memory. The crack of a twig made her turn. Her heart beat faster as she looked for movement in the tall grass at the edge of the forest. When she saw a crouching form with pointed ears and sharp teeth pushing through the dappled shade, she spun the sling and sent the stone flying. She heard the animal huff when the rock struck home with a thwack and hurled 2 more stones before a familiar voice shocked her into dropping the slingshot. "Stop, Caitlin! By the goddess, Macha, stop!" Tamper stood up, waving her arms over her head in mock surrender. A wolf's pelt dangled from her shoulders, the head pulled low over Tamper's forehead so the animal's gleaming teeth framed her face. Tamper pulled off her disguise and rubbed her shoulder. "Good goddess, girl, what's going on you?" Tamper said, grinning. "I may never draw a bow again." Caitlin froze, heart pounding, but surprised, too surprised to be angry at being fooled. Tamper rolled her arm to loosen the bruised muscles and turned to shout, "Ho! Come, crazed little Caitlin. If that stone had hit my head, she would have put me in the next world." All around her, warriors rose from the underbrush, bristling with weapons, hair and battle braids, and faces full of mischief. Melee came out of hiding, roaring with laughter. She picked Caitlin up and whirled her high in the air as if she were a small child. "Caitlin, Caitlin, I tell you, I felt that rock!" I'm surprised Tamper's still not on her ass back there in the brush. "What an eye you have!" Melee gazed at her fondly, her big brown eyes crinkling with good humor. She set Caitlin down and ruffled her hair like a puppy. Tamper bragged she could make you wet your pants. "You showed her, little Caitlin." Magda, mother of the obnoxious Samsey, hugged Caitlin close. Her face was frozen in a permanent scowl from an old sword blow, but her words were joyous. She clapped Caitlin on the back with a blow that staggered her. Caitlin was dazed. Magda had never talked to her before. Tamper gathered Caitlin in a huge embrace, and then she held her at arm's length and looked at her keenly. "By the goddess, little bird, that was a hell of a throw." Tamper tilted her head up with a thumb under her chin. "I swear, you almost splintered a bone in my arm." She turned to her companions. "Holy mother, this girl's a real woman. Who would ever know?" Caitlin Caitlin saw for the first time how Tamber's arms were crisscrossed with scars. She had never been this close to her. The elders said Tamber was Buddhicum reborn. She stood taller than any woman but melee. No one could equal her with a bow. Few could match her with a sword or spear. She had killed more men than any warrior in memory. And now she stood looking down into Caitlin's eyes, making her dizzy with happiness. The great warrior's long golden hair was pulled back in battle braids, tied with strips of leather dyed bright scarlet, the color that only Tamber could wear. Her bright sky blue eyes were dancing with mirth. "Let's see you do it again," Tamber said, squeezing Caitlin's arm tightly. "Melee, set up a mark." Caitlin swallowed and her hands shook. The great melee cut down a sapling with her sword and plunged it into the soft earth. She used her dagger to peel several inches of bark away, exposing a slash of white hardwood. Tamber picked up Caitlin's slingshot and loaded it with a fresh stone. She handed the sling to Caitlin and smiled widely. "Go to it, sister. Show us how it's done." Caitlin was paralyzed. She dreaded disappointing her idol, and most of all, she did not want to turn back into stupid Caitlin, the comic shepherd. She wanted this moment to last forever. She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Tamber, I fear I can't accurately throw with that inspiration. Perhaps if you would put the wolf hook back on?" Tamber stared at her for a full moment and then started to laugh, first chuckling and then throwing back her head and roaring. One by one, the warriors joined in, the merriment increasing until Melee was weeping and Magna rolling on the ground. Caitlin stared about bewildered, but then she too began to laugh, weakly at first and then with gusto. It was impossible to stop once well begun. Ilya picked up the wolf's hide and danced around with it over her back, singing a ditty as she spun in the meadow. "Don't hit me, little bird, don't hit me with a rock. Don't hit me, little bird, you gave me quite a shock." The women collapsed again. When Tamber finally caught her breath, she wiped her eyes and hugged Caitlin. "No, indeed, little bird. I won't be your target again. I take you at your word," she said, still laughing. "I don't ever want to experience firsthand proof of your skill. You keep your stones for the real wolves. I'll never sneak up on you again." She playfully pulled Caitlin's head under her arm and rolled her knuckles roughly over the girl's skull, ending with a sharp rap that made Caitlin yelp. "Take care of your sheep, noble shepherd," Tamber said, saluting the girl. "Come, friends, let's go home and give Katya some meat for our dinner and surprise Andraste with our salt. I have a mighty hunger and an even mightier thirst." The warriors cheered and were off at a run for the forest, leaving Caitlin watching from the meadow. When they disappeared into the shadows, Caitlin was left wondering if she had imagined it all. She gingerly touched her head and winced. The impact of Tamber's knuckles had been no dream. Caitlin smiled.